The wind was sharp that morning, carrying the scent of rain as Richard Hale stepped out of his sleek black car. In one hand, he held a small bouquet of white lilies, his son's favorite. The cemetery was quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel under his polished shoes. He had come here many times before, always alone, always with the same heavy weight pressing on his chest. But today, something was different. As he approached the familiar marble headstone, he slowed. There, kneeling before it, was a young woman in a faded waitress uniform. Her shoulders trembled, her head bowed low. Beside her stood a small boy, no more than 6, clutching her hand tightly. The boy's big brown eyes followed her every movement, as if her sadness was his own. Richard stopped a few paces away, confused. He had never seen them before. His son had been gone for nearly a year. How could this stranger be here, crying as though she had lost him too? The woman's tears slid down her cheeks and splashed onto the cold gray stone. She brushed them away quickly, glancing at the boy before turning back to the grave. Her lips moved, whispering words Richard couldn't hear. Something about the scene tugged at him, a mixture of grief, tenderness, and mystery. He found himself frozen, the lilies growing heavier in his hand. For the first time since his son's death, Richard felt not only sorrow, but a deep, burning need to know the truth. Richard cleared his throat softly, the sound almost swallowed by the damp morning air. The woman looked up, startled, quickly wiping her eyes. Up close, she looked younger than he'd first thought, tired, yes, but with a gentle face that spoke of quiet endurance. The little boy shifted behind her, peeking out from the safety of her arm. "I'm sorry," Richard said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't expect to see anyone here." She hesitated, glancing at the headstone, then back at him. "You're his father," she said, more a statement than a question. He nodded slowly. Her voice wavered as she explained. She had worked the late shift at a small diner on the edge of town, a place Richard had never been. His son had come in often, always alone, always polite. One night, when her little boy was sick and she couldn't afford the medicine, she had sat in the corner of the diner during her break, trying not to cry. Somehow, his son had noticed. He had quietly paid her entire bill for the week, slipping out before she could say thank you. Her fingers trembled as she spoke, the memory as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. "I thought I'd see him again," she whispered, "but he was gone before I could." The boy clutched her hand tighter, looking up at Richard with innocent eyes. In that moment, the billionaire felt something shift inside him, a crack in the armor he had worn for far too long. Maya's gaze drifted toward the boy, a faint, bittersweet smile tugging at her lips. "It wasn't just that night," she continued softly. She told Richard how his son had come to the diner regularly after that, always sitting at the same booth, always asking about her boy. Sometimes he'd bring small things, a toy car, a coloring book, a slice of pie he insisted was extra. Other times, he'd just listen, offering quiet encouragement as she talked about her struggles. Richard stood there, stunned. His son had never mentioned any of this. He had always thought of him as distant, even spoiled, born into wealth, untouched by hardship. Yet here was proof, right in front of him, that his son had been living a life Richard knew nothing about, one filled with quiet acts of kindness. The boy stepped forward shyly, still holding his mother's hand. His voice was small, but clear. "He told me, when I grow up, I should be kind like him." The words hit Richard like a blow and a blessing all at once. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He looked at the boy, then at Maya, and finally back to his son's name carved in stone. A warmth spread through the cold ache in his chest, a realization that his son's greatest wealth wasn't in the fortune he would have inherited, but in the compassion he had chosen to give away freely. And for the first time in a long while, Richard felt both grief and pride battling inside him. Richard knelt down so he was level with the boy, the damp earth seeping through the knees of his tailored suit. He studied the child's small face, innocent, yet carrying the weight of understanding beyond his years. "What's your name?" Richard asked gently. "Eli," the boy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard turned to Maya, his eyes softening. "You've done everything you could for him," he said. "But you shouldn't have to do it alone." She shook her head quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted him," she glanced at the grave, "to know I didn't forget what he did for us." Richard's throat tightened. This wasn't about charity. This was about carrying forward something his son had started. He reached into the bouquet and pulled out a single white lily, placing it carefully in Eli's small hands. "This was your friend's favorite flower," he said. "If you'll let me, I want to make sure his kindness lives on through you." Maya's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" "I'll take care of Eli's education. Make sure he has what he needs, a safe home, a future. No strings, no conditions. Just, in his memory." For a moment, silence hung in the cool morning air. Then Eli smiled faintly, clutching the flower as if it were made of gold. And in that quiet exchange, Richard felt the first flicker of something he hadn't felt since his son's death, hope. They walked together toward the cemetery gates, the gravel crunching softly beneath their steps. Richard carried the empty bouquet wrapper, its flowers now resting at the grave and in Eli's small hands. The morning fog was beginning to lift, and faint streaks of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a gentle glow over the rows of headstones. Maya kept a protective arm around her son, glancing at Richard from time to time, as though still unsure if this moment was real. Eli skipped ahead a few paces, clutching the lily carefully so as not to damage its delicate petals. When they reached the gates, Richard paused and turned back. His eyes lingered on his son's grave in the distance, the white lily standing out against the gray stone. For so long, every visit had felt like reopening a wound. But today, there was something else, something lighter. Pride. Gratitude. A quiet sense that his son's life, though far too short, had touched the world in ways Richard had never imagined. He glanced down at Eli, who was now looking up at him with a shy smile. Richard smiled back, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Let's make him proud," he said softly. As they stepped out into the sunlight, the chill of the morning seemed to fade. Richard knew grief would never leave him entirely, but now, it was tempered by a purpose. His son's kindness would live on, not in monuments or bank accounts, but in the life of a little boy holding a single white lily.